Welcome to Create Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast, where we discuss the changing world and how the design industries will need to adapt. Today, our topic is going to be how the shift towards the home is going to impact the post-COVID-19 world. For those of us privileged enough to have stable living situations and the kinds of jobs that allow us to work from home, this period has led to the home becoming largely the centre of our universes and a sanctuary from an increasingly scary world outside. This shift hasn't suddenly happened in the past 7 weeks, but has been emerging behaviour that we've been tracking on WGSN for quite some time. We talked about the rise of the home hub and the home economy for millennials back in 2018. Millennials who were seeking control in a world that was largely feeling increasingly insecure. Now, obviously, this has been accelerated for everyone during this period. But as we start to consider the world on the other side of this crisis, we're here today to explore how the home is changing, but also how our feelings about our homes will drive design trends beyond the home too. I'm your host, Peter Marion, and I'm a senior editor on WGSN Insight, where I look at shifting consumer and business trends. I'm working from Hackney in London today. And I'm joined by a few of my colleagues on WGSN who I've been missing so much during the current lockdown period. We have Lisa White, the person with the longest job title in the company, Creative Director of WGSN and Director of our Lifestyle and Interiors team. Lisa, where are you? And what's been your coping strategy through your confinement?
Hi, Peter. I've been quarantining in Paris with my son. And I guess besides baking too many cakes and attempting DIY, for which I have none of the necessary tools, I've been coping through planting every seed I've ever collected in pots and foraging flowers in the streets to bring spring indoors.
I look forward to seeing the results of that. Also from the L&I team, we have Claire Dickinson, an editor. Claire, welcome. Where are you today and what new hobbies have you picked up during this period?
Hi, Peter. So I am in Leighton in East London. I'm quarantining on my own. So aside from the standard kind of decluttering, deep cleaning, I've been kind of doing bits of DIY decoration and planting lots of stuff out in my outdoor area, which, I'm very thankful for right now.
Fantastic. And finally, from Insight, we have my fellow senior editor, Laura Saunter. Where are you and what has been getting you through this period?
Hi, Peter. Hi, everyone. I'm in London as well. I'm just at home where I've been for the past, 6 or 7 weeks or something. What have I been doing? I've been doing lots of sort of reorganising around my home, cleaning out my wardrobe, putting things on eBay, that kind of thing. And I've also signed up to pretty much every subscription service that you can think of. So flower delivery, wine, meal kits, Disney Plus, you name it, I'm on it. But no, I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking.
No worries. That sounds like a pretty idyllic existence in your place at the moment, Laura. So to jump in, let's talk about the spaces that we live in. What's changing in terms of our relationships to our homes? Laura, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So at WGSN, we've obviously been tracking what you referred to before as the home economy since about, I think, 2018 now. And that was really when we first saw a shift towards people, especially millennials, people kind of my age, feeling more and more anxious about the world around them. And as a result, they were really wanting to spend more time at home. And that was when we really saw the whole JOMO, joy of missing out movement, taking off. And obviously this led to a huge shift towards kind of at-home services taking off across a number of industries. So at-home beauty, at-home exercise, home delivery, things like that, they all really ramped up. Obviously, the current situation has now massively accelerated this shift and the home has become this kind of hub for doing everything. So like working, exercising, celebrating everything. And what this is doing is driving this kind of new sense of autonomy for people. So, we can't go out to eat anymore. We can't go to work. We can't see our friends. We can't go out to get fit. So people are being forced to take control of their own experiences at home. And this is really changing our relationships that we have with the space around us, because increasingly the place where we live is also the main site for our professional and personal fulfillment. And this is really causing people to reevaluate what they do in their space. We're having to carve out more moments for connection with other people and compassion. And obviously we want to be surrounded by comfort, and that adds to our sense of sort of security and helps us feel less anxious about the world around us during this time.
Claire, have you been seeing anything around this shift in terms of these relationships?
Yeah, I guess just to sort of echo what Laura said, there's I'm kind of sure that everyone can agree that, you know, it's not easy. Quarantining is hard, and it's while it's important to enjoy it at times, there's absolutely no shame in that. But there's also kind of quite serious mental health implications involved, and so the home plays this really crucial role in relieving the stress and the anxiety that the situation can bring.
And so, I mean, you really sort of highlighted this real emotional experience that people are having with their homes. And so what is it about being at home that's changing how we're experiencing the world from an emotional perspective?
Well, we're having so many emotions right now, actually, and the home is the safe space for emotion. So, you know, even when we're working from home, we end up feeling things that we would normally suppress at work. And I don't know if you've noticed, like when you're on meetings and stuff, you've got like these higher and lower feelings of emotion that are happening. So in these really highly emotional times, it's becoming very clear to us that the number one driver of behavior and consumer behavior is emotion. It's not about rationality. So when we see people buying things in supermarkets, for example, we see them buying things out of fear or out of joy or out of hope. And our homes are being organized as places where we can express these feelings and desires. So we were talking earlier about organizing things or cooking things, or my son who's next door gaming things, or just actually doing nothing, which is fine too. So people are becoming even more emotionally tied to their homes because we're living these really intense moments.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, you know, as Lisa said, people are very emotional beings, and obviously we're living in very kind of emotive times. And I think if you are lucky enough to be sort of sheltering safely with loved ones and you're healthy, then I think people are feeling a whole range of emotions. You might be feeling a really heightened sense of like belonging or togetherness right now, or even if you're not physically with your friends or your family, then obviously we've seen this massive uptick in people being on Zoom and FaceTime. So social bonding is higher than ever. And I think people are probably feeling like a higher sense of comfort and also weirdly probably relief in some ways. Of course, unless you're like a key worker, you don't really have anywhere to be. We're not really obligated to sort of see anyone or do anything. And I think this is really interesting because over the last few years at WGSN especially, we've been tracking how people or millennials have been feeling like this kind of superhuman syndrome almost, like this cult of productivity has really taken hold over the last few years. And people have had to feel like they have to say yes to everything and like do everything that they're asked to do to prove their worth. And this has kind of led to like burnout and people feeling really anxious and stuff. And I think it's really interesting that now that people don't have anywhere to be and there's no plans to feel guilty about not saying yes to, then this is really shifting. And people shouldn't feel guilty or ashamed in actually, you know, enjoying the lockdown where possible, and just taking pleasure in doing nothing and having this kind of antidote to like that always on culture that we've seen over the last few years, and encouraging people just to find joy in like small moments of happiness or embracing like self-compassion or building up your kind of emotional resilience. All of these things are really important, and they're being exacerbated by being at home and living through this kind of very uncertain period.
It's really interesting you say that, because as it's one of the things that I keep seeing as we're talking about this, it's that this idea that our world is getting smaller and smaller in terms of the things that we can do, and we're getting this sort of real sense of control over our experiences. And then that's sort of creating all these different kinds of emotions and rituals. And I was just wondering, how is that translating into new kinds of rituals in the home? And how does this align with these new values that are emerging?
Yeah, so we're seeing people explore new rituals that transform the home almost into a sacred space, just to kind of make the everyday more beautiful. You know, they're finding joy in simple pleasures, and they're marking their time through mindful moments. So this could be a simple gesture like lighting a candle with dinner, or it could be a super luxurious spa-inspired bathing ritual, or it could be cleansing the energy of spaces using things like sage. And we're also seeing people carve out space in the home physically. And that's either as a place of solitude or for mindful activities. So think dedicated spots for meditation, or it could be a reading nook or somewhere comfortable just to sit and enjoy a moment of stillness and silence.
And it's something that we were exploring in the first episode when we were talking about beauty, really around those sorts of new beauty rituals and self-care rituals. And I think that that's really emerging across everywhere that we're talking about this across WGSN. let's start to think about what this will look like as we move out of this period of confinement. We've covered this as China has come out of the pandemic on the site, but Lisa, I think you're closest to coming out of confinement so far. So what are you expecting for broader experience design coming out of this?
Well, in France, we should start to come out of confinement on May 11th if all goes well. And I know that some consumers will burst out of their houses, eager to get to a park or a store or just to get their hair cut. And other people are going to find it difficult to leave the safe spaces of their homes. And even myself, I feel like it's going to be kind of weird going in that big bad world out there. A lot of people have been comforted by the four walls that are around them and the daily rituals they've established at home. And the slower pace of life as well, too, not being in that commute. And so they're really going to need a real reason to leave the house and a reason to go and engage in public experience. We're not going to have restaurants and cafes that are open, so it's really going to be going out for specific things. So I guess in order to reassure consumers, like hospitality and retail, you're going to have to focus on designing sanctuary experiences, kind of like what we've made in our homes. And that's going to have to be encouraging feelings of safety and positive emotions. And I think also too experiences that are going to allow consumers to connect with other senses. So I guess sound and scent are going to be really important, and they're so tied to emotion. I once interviewed a smell engineer, and what he does is he goes into nightclubs and he either gets people excited through scent or calms them down through scent. And orange blossom was his go-to for getting people to relax and calm down. So maybe that's something, the scent and the fragrance is going to be used in public spaces to make people feel safe again.
That's a really interesting thing to be thinking about around scent and the sort of fully sensorial aspect that's going to come into experience design. But then as we're moving more into the sort of more architectural side of things in the physical store space, what's this going to mean, Laura?
Yeah, so just to sort of bring things to being a bit more tangible, I think, without question, retail design is definitely going to adapt and evolve. I think none of us can doubt that. The main driver is going to be the shift towards a more, we're calling it low impact society, basically where people just aren't going to want to have that much interaction with others in a physical space, whether that's other shoppers or, associates and employees in store. So store design is going to have to really adapt to allow for this kind of lack of human connection. But obviously you still have to find that sweet spot as a retailer in giving really good service. And this is where we're going to see a massive rise in digital innovation in retail. So more than ever, I think there's going to be unmanned, autonomous kind of services in stores. So things like self-service kiosks, contactless payments, digital ordering, delivery only, things like curbside pickup, drive-through stores. These things are all going to see huge development and be rolled out around the world for retail. Hygiene and cleanliness is obviously going to be a massive concern. So I think we're going to see strategies that create more space between shoppers. So whether that's spaced out or closed off fitting rooms, so without the curtain but an actual structure, or fitting rooms more far apart from each other, or even a change in store navigation, so echoing that kind of one-way system that we've seen grocery stores implement during all of this.
Laura, what you say is really interesting because it's starting to sort of run against a lot of the trends that we've been talking about in recent years, because this idea of increased space, a lack of connection, all this designing for distance really means that we won't be able to develop those human connections and those intimate connections and emotional connections that we've been really talking about as a means of differentiating from e-commerce. So how can retailers start to build that emotional experience back into the experience?
I think it's about new engagement tools and new engagement strategies. So we've seen a massive shift towards live video and live streaming, especially over the last few months and weeks. We've seen massive high adoption rates in China, especially with people using brands and retailers using Instagram Live, Facebook Live. And, hosting these kind of live stream events, whether as a marketing tool or for a product drop, or even just as building a kind of sense of community between brands and adding this kind of sense of storytelling and education is really important, because I think connecting with people in real time over video is very authentic and it's quite immersive as well. And I think if you can tie it back to a sale, maybe having a one-on-one consultation through FaceTime or WhatsApp, which is what some beauty brands are doing, digital masterclasses, which then link to people buying products afterwards, that's where you will improve your bottom line while still kind of making this important connection.
back to experience design, Claire, what sort of innovations are you seeing to help create that sense of safety and security?
Well, we're seeing lots of innovations in design emerging around things like handle hacks for hands-free door opening. We're also seeing lots of innovations around surface applications. So, for example, sanitized floor varnish, which creates like an invisible barrier against germs and microbes. But then also materials that are naturally antimicrobial, like copper, for example, will become increasingly important in the designing of spaces. But then we're also kind of seeing wider conceptual ideas emerge in the design world. So, for example, there's a conceptual park with maze-like hedgerows that allow for people to be outside, but also still maintaining and following the social distancing rules. So obviously these are just conceptual ideas at the moment, but they can sort of filter down and inspire other areas of physical design.
Fantastic. And moving back into the digital world, what about how we communicate online, and what are the strategies that businesses will need to undertake to reach the consumer in this space of feeling concerned and looking for security, particularly in the home?
Yeah, I've been tracking how lots of retailers and brands have been adopting like a digital first mentality at the moment, which is obviously really crucial. And one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing is around tone of voice in your online communication. So brands are really using their online channels to express like positivity and optimism and be really reassuring. And I think this is really important because consumers are feeling anxious and they are looking to brands for comfort and stability. Another thing that I'm seeing is keeping people distracted as a really big engagement tool. So brands creating and cultivating their own like online communities. So things like book clubs, podcasts, any kind of creative outlets around culture and lifestyle content that are engaging people and supporting young people who work in creative industries.
Yeah, and I would also just add that it's kind of about inspiring people. So people are really yearning to be creative right now. And it's also the perfect time to improve the home. So any kind of inspiration or ideas around how to rework or organise a space or feel-good narratives around how to build a sanctuary is really important. So yeah, it needs to be in a really mindful and sensitive way that really puts the consumer first and somehow brings a bit of happiness into their lives.
That's really lovely, Claire. And we've seen some retailers and some brands doing some really interesting stuff around tutorials on how to customize their own product and fix their own goods and things like that. So it's a really interesting shift that we're seeing emerge. But if you could give our listeners two things that they should be doing from an immediate perspective and a longer term one, what would that be?
Yeah, sure. So for the short term, I'd probably say online merchandising and messaging to help consumers build their own sanctuaries. And then I guess for the longer term, think about the changes that people may make to their homes. So this could be the growing importance of an entryway where people can, shed their outdoor attire and their germs, or it could be about how people are carving out space in the home and using it in new ways. And what will those ways be?
Lisa, what would yours be?
So I think for the short term, what's most important is to reassure consumers that you understand what they're feeling, to communicate with them in a way that's not about selling product as much as it's about creating an empathetic relationship for them and really respecting those emotions. And for the long term, obviously, things can still function online, but the whole idea of addressing consumer emotion will move to the physical space. And these things can both coexist and should both coexist because for me, one of the most important results and learnings of the coronavirus era has been the removal of the barriers between that idea between a digital and a real life emotional experience because we can feel a lot more digitally than we thought we could.
Great. And Laura, what would your advice be?
So short term, digital first in everything, selling, streaming, building online communities. Now is the time to leverage all of your online channels and your social media platforms. Long term, I would say retailers are going to need to start mobilizing store design teams, product designers, architects, you name it, to start putting these kind of strategies in motion for designing for distance that I talked about. So rethinking the layouts of their stores to really prioritize like safety and hygiene, as well as replicating the kind of home comforts and digital services that we've really got used to over the last few months.
Thanks for listening to the WGSN podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, then please subscribe to us. You can find us on all major podcast platforms. And if you really like what you heard, then please leave us a rating and review. It really does help us get the word out there. If you're interested in what we've been talking about today, then please head over to WGSN.com to find out how you can get access to much more insight and analysis. And if you're already a WGSN subscriber, then head over to the site where we've pulled together all of our research on the home sector in the current and post-COVID-19 world with key points from this podcast in one handy report. Thanks to our guests for being here, and I'd like to thank our show producers, Jamie Barr and Roland Bodenham. And again, thank you for being here. Please stay well and healthy, and we'll see you next time.